Hello and welcome to the Third Sector podcast. I'm Lucinda Rouse.
And I'm Emily Burt. Each week we bring you half an hour of discussion and debate about the important goings-on in the charity world. And this week we're joined by Fola Komolafe, who is the Chief Executive of World Vision UK. And later in Charity Changed My Life, we'll be hearing how the Kent, Surrey and Sussex air ambulance transformed one couple's life for the better.
But let's get straight on with this week's main interview. Fola Komolafe is the Chief Executive of World Vision UK, an international Christian charity which exists to help vulnerable children in more than 30 countries around the world. And she's relatively new to the charity, having been in post since last October. Hi, Fola.
Hello, nice to meet you both.
So one of the things that I understand you've been focusing on, in particular in the past 6 months, is a drive for African philanthropy. Could you tell us a little bit about the African Philanthropy Initiative? I understand it's been going 5 years, and why you consider it as an organisation to be important.
So you rightfully introduced me and talked about World Vision operating in more than 30 countries. It's actually more than 100 countries at the moment in which we have our operations. And of course, that gives us a big global interest across different continents and parts of the world. And one of those parts of the world where we operate significantly is across Africa. So we've got lots of programming, lots of development, humanitarian work going across the region. And as we started to think about Africa, there's also a recognition that there's a wide diaspora of Africans spread across the UK and in the western parts of the world. And a lot of them want to connect back to support, to help, and to find a way to make an impact now that they have the opportunity to give back. So the African Philanthropy Program was a way of how we could connect and make that connection using a lot of the infrastructure that is already in place that World Vision is able to leverage in terms of delivery of excellent programs across the countries. So it was targeting those in diaspora, those who wanted to connect back, but also Africans who are wealthy in Africa themselves, who needed a charity like World Vision, which is reliable, trustworthy, impactful, that they also could use in terms of investing back into the region. So that's the main reasons why we set up the African Philanthropy Program.
And are there other global charities who you're partnering with or who are part of a wider drive to stimulate African philanthropy?
I know some other charities have done so in the past, so we don't necessarily partner with anyone at the moment, but I know there are other charities that would have, one comes to mind actually, that would have done something like this in the past and most likely has it as part of their fundraising strategy. What we also have is we've got ambassadors. So we've got ambassadors like Maro Itoje and Freda, who plays football, a lot of sports ambassadors who are of African origin. So we work with them and we partner with them and we support them in also making a difference in Africa, which is where they want to invest into. So we have those kind of partnerships with our ambassadors, but not necessarily with another organization who's in a similar thing.
So it's a really important initiative to have, as you say, local people reinvesting their wealth into their region, creating a sustainable ecosystem around Africa. I wonder, are there any things and any roles that charities based in the UK can play in supporting this initiative?
I think yes. I mean, the thing as well is the world has changed significantly in terms of philanthropy and in terms of aid and development. And I guess a lot of what we're trying to do with the African Philanthropy Initiative as well is also to say that the West can also learn a lot from African philanthropists. So it's not just a one-way thing where we in the West are investing, but it's also saying what can we as the charitable sector who run significant programs in different parts of Africa, what can we learn from African philanthropists? What can we learn that can also shape new ways of funding across the continent that has sustainable impact over a long term. So I think there is learning to come through into the sector. There is learning to come into organizations like ours, which is World Vision, and other organizations that are running programs internationally. I mean, what we are trying to do with the philanthropy program is to transform the lives of 20 million women, children, and men by 2027. So that's a real firm goal that we're working on. But we know that it's a two-way. It's what we learn is how our programs are shaped by the learnings as well for our charity and for other charities that enable us to make sure that their voice is quite impactful in shaping what we do.
And you said that things are changing in this respect. And I know that there's been a lot of thinking going on in the charity sector and the international development space in terms of how these agreements and forms of support are implemented and how decisions are ultimately made in terms of how money is spent. Do you think that there is still need for significant further change in terms of how charities work with their partners overseas?
Yes, and you may know that yesterday we launched one of our reports in the House of Parliament, and that report was a report that we produced with Ernst & Young. And because we're a child-based charity, it was talking about putting children first for sustainable development. And the purpose of that report was really to emphasize that whilst there is sort of a moral agreement for putting children, so we work children out, so bear with me if I talk about children more. While there's a moral agreement for putting children first, we don't always do it. We don't put children first in policies. We don't put children first in the decisions that we're making. And if you look at, for example, with the government in terms of the official development assistance that is spent on children-related programs, that's only 5%. And we know that in those countries, 46% of the population is made up of children. So you can see a disproportionate investment in terms of the programs that are being rolled out and invested in, and also the size of the need. So there is still a need to raise awareness, in terms of how do we put children first? How do we make sure that they are shaping policies and decisions? How do we make sure that they're at the heart, their voice? We have a youth advocacy network that worked with the government here for the Global Food Security Summit. That was all around their voices shaping the programs and the policies that matter to them. Now, charities can do the same. It's not just with the government, it's across every organization that is investing in these programs. How do we put them first? Because that is how we sort out the SDG goals, and that's how we ensure that we have sustainable development in the long term.
And keeping on this theme of keeping children first and keeping them at the heart of your strategic mission. Now, we know that more than a third of your income at World Vision International last year came from individual donors or your so-called child sponsors. And child sponsorship is something that many international charities run as part of their fundraising efforts or their offerings. I wonder, what do you kind of see as the benefits of child sponsorship as a fundraising model, and any of the stigma that can come attached to that?
So child sponsorship has been something World Vision has been involved in for over 70 years. And over that period of time, the value of child sponsorship is the fact that you are staying in an area for a significant period of time. So I recently visited Sierra Leone, and Sierra Leone was the first area program that World Vision UK supported through child sponsorship. So that was registered children. They have a sponsor. And World Vision UK had been there for over 30 years. And it was good to go back into a place, it's called the Jong District, to go back to the Jong District and see the real impact of having a child sponsor over that period of time. So there were stories, for example, there was a particular story of a lady who had been at the beginning stages, 30 years ago, who was now in her second term in parliament. There was the story of another lady who had gone through university and was now working back within the sector. And you could see how the whole community had taken ownership of their own development and their own progress, that it had become what they do. The children, the young adults, the men, the women. So it wasn't just a child. So with our programs, yes, it starts with a child, but it extends to the families and the community. So everybody benefits from it. So you can see the change. And you could almost see the change from that community to another one that hadn't had the child sponsorship program, and how the children were a little bit more timid, a little bit more, didn't have a lot of voice, a little bit not aware of their rights, didn't understand hygiene and stuff. Totally different. So coming to your question about the benefits of child sponsorship, that is the benefit of child sponsorship. It's the sustainable difference over time that is made in the lives of children, families, and communities. And it's very measurable and it's tangible and it can be seen. The other advantage of child sponsorship is that it connects the donor directly to a child. So I know who my child is. I know them by name. I can pray with them. I can, go on a journey with them. I can engage with them. So it's more than just a donation. It's more than I'm just giving my money to a charity. I have a relationship. I have a relationship with a child, with their family, with a community. I can see them, so there's a direct impact. There's a one-to-one connection with a child on the ground. So when you look at things like that, there's significant value, even though it's been 70 years to child sponsorship. Now, of course, part of the myth around child sponsorship is that it's old. Is it the in thing? Is there a new in thing, for doing development? Is there something that can achieve the same results in a short time frame? The honest truth is no, because to be on that journey with a child over a period of time, there is nothing else, I think, that matches that experience for the child and also for the donor. So for me, that is why child sponsorship still is a significant part of what we do at World Vision UK.
And how do you respond to criticism, of which there have been, particularly in rethinking philanthropy and the relationship between donors and charity service users, that this kind of model runs the risk of being quite paternalistic?
And I think it's all in the delivery. I think when you hear the word child sponsorship, it means many things to many people. So some people see it as sort of giving the money, almost the white savior kind of like mentality, But it's in the delivery and in the engagement. When you visit one of our programs, for example, you will see that it's not that at all. The power sits with the child. The power in terms of determining what happens in that program that is delivered, the voice of the child matters. So I am not the one deciding that I'm going to give this benefit. I'm not the one with the power. And we actually have a product, you may have heard of it, called Chosen, where we've turned the child sponsorship model on its head. And the way Chosen works is the typical historical child sponsorship model was, I chose the child, so I get a picture and I say, okay, yes, I want Jane to be my child. With the Chosen model, it works very differently because the child is now choosing who they want to support. So the child has pictures of different potential sponsors and they make the choice. So I may be chosen or I may not be chosen. And that's shifting the balance of power. So I now know what it feels like to not be chosen by a child, which was what used to happen to the child before. So in that way, we're trying to shift the power and the dynamics to put more of the decision making with the child around their choice. They chose me. I didn't choose them. What their needs are, they define that. I don't define that. It's more like I'm just on that journey, privileged to be supporting them on a journey that they want to go through. So it's all in how the programs are run and how they're delivered that makes a significant difference.
That's so interesting. And it's really compelling to hear those kind of parallel paths along with the African Philanthropy Initiative in shifting that power, shifting that agency, and also having it all grounded in a long-term sustainable ambition. So World Vision International is, of course, it's a faith charity and one of the big ones. So I would love to hear your views on sort of the role and the importance of faith-based charities in UK and wider society today, particularly given that in this country, the overall numbers of Christian congregations are going down at the moment.
It's interesting that is happening in this country. I don't think it's happening around the world in the same way. I think faith has become quite important in most places where we work. And when we deliver our programs, we deliver to everybody. So we are not biased at all in any way in terms of our delivery. Our faith gives us a unique advantage because our faith means that we hold certain values true to ourselves in how we work, how we treat people, and how we make sure that we are good stewards of the money that has been entrusted into our hands to do the work that we've been called to do. So those are some of the advantages being an organization of faith means. It's our Christian identity, and that's core to everything we do at World Vision UK. Now, when you look at where we deliver our programs and you talk about faith, most communities are formed around faith. Most people in communities rely on their faith more than anything when they're in desperate need, when everything else fails, when there's no education, there's no food, there's no water. Most communities rely on faith in whatever way that looks like for them, but there will be something like that. So it's great that we as an organization can speak into those spaces because we are a faith-based charity. So we understand what it means to hold faith close to your heart. We understand what it means to run our programs with faith built into them. So we have something called channels of hope. So whilst we're delivering programs, we're also ensuring that people can put their trust and their hope in something greater, someone greater, who ultimately is their source. So back to your point about being paternalistic, we are faith-based. So, we know that everything, our source comes from God. We build that in, but we don't demand anybody, to be of a particular faith, or we don't even push our faith, but we recognize that there is a uniqueness to us as an organization, but also there's a uniqueness to the delivery into communities, whether that's of a Muslim faith or of a Christian faith or any other faith that holds faith dear to them, that we also can speak into.
And I know that World Vision is a global charity, and the people, and specifically the children that you are serving as a charity, are for the most part in the global south. But thinking specifically about the UK charity sector and the role and importance of faith-based charities in UK society, do you think anything more could be done to support faith-based charities in reaching and helping what are often called hard to reach or marginalized communities in this country?
I think yes. And I think over the years, if I look at the government that we work with as well, there's been greater recognition of the role of faith-based charities in the UK. So, for example, it was last week there was a Faith and Development Conference with FCDO and ministers, and that is a recognition that faith-based charities have a significant role to play in terms of delivering programs internationally. So I think there is greater recognition given to it now than before in the UK. Of course, there always can be more. I have sat in conversations, even if you look at some of the humanitarian crisis that is going on in the world, I have sat in conversations with ministers where the issue of faith has been discussed, and faith as a channel of delivery, and as a channel of impact into the lives of children and communities that are significantly being disrupted at the moment. So yes is the answer to your question, but I think that's also starting to happen, and I hope that we see more of that as well go on.
Wonderful. Well, Fola Komolafe, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we would love to have you back once you are a bit further into your tenure to hear how these ambitious projects are going for World Vision International. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And now we move on to Charity Changed My Life, in which we bring you the stories of people whose lives have been transformed for the better thanks to the work of charities. This week we hear from Sarah Cadcolo, whose husband Surrey's life was saved by the swift intervention of the Kent, Surrey and Sussex Air Ambulance.
My husband, out of the blue, suffered a very serious cardiac arrest some years ago. He was fit, well, healthy, never been to see the doctor, just kind of one of those always healthy people. The day it all happened was he was off work and had been to the gym, came back, cooked us lunch, and then I heard a really odd noise from our bathroom. Went to see, and he was out cold on the bathroom floor. As we found out afterwards, Surrey had a cardiac arrest, and these cardiogenic shocks are nearly always fatal when they happen out of hospital. It's early intervention, early response, early expertise and equipment that's needed, and that all came with the air ambulance. I talk about them as my superheroes because they arrived in what was the most horrific day for us and just helped us along the track with survival. When you're in your very own medical disaster, a movie, because that's what it feels like when it's all happening around you. You're having an out-of-body experience, really, of not being able to process what's happening. They came, they took over, they administered and gave him the best chance of survival, which he did. You don't ever think about this service until you need it in a critical situation. And then afterwards, when you discover it's a charity, it blows your mind that these people rely on funding to be able to provide the most critical services at your darkest hour of need. We spent our 15th wedding anniversary in hospital. I didn't even think at the time whether we were going to get to our 15th wedding anniversary. But last year we celebrated our 20th, and that didn't seem possible when we were in those stages of treatment. My husband has been able to go and visit his mum who lives overseas. All these things, we wouldn't have been a family. My life would have been entirely different if we hadn't had that support of the charity at the time.
That was Sarah Cadcolo telling her story of how the Kent, Surrey and Sussex Air Ambulance came to the rescue on a very dark day. And if you'd like your organisation to be featured in Charity Changed My Life, as ever, we would love to hear from you. All it takes is a short voice message from someone who has benefited from your services. You can find details of how to get in touch in the show notes to this episode.
And that's it for this week. We'll be back again next week. So for now, thanks to our guest Fola Komolafe and our producer Nav Pal.